My name is Marlene, and am 32 years old. The moment my brother Derek said those words at Thanksgiving dinner, everything changed. I'd just arrived at my parents' house in suburban Connecticut, walking through the door alone as usual, when Derek looked me up and down with that smirk I'd known my whole life. His girlfriend Christina laughed, making some snide comment about my pantsuit being too masculine. Then Derek delivered the line that would haunt me for months. "You're likely a lesbian who can't get a man." The entire table went silent. My jaw clenched as I watched my mother Patricia look away in embarrassment, while my father Howard cleared his throat uncomfortably. The humiliation burned through my chest like acid, but what happened next caught my attention more than the insult. Christina's phone buzzed on the table, lighting up with texts from someone named Jay, each message decorated with heart emojis. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If you've ever dealt with family drama or felt like the black sheep, hit that like button and subscribe because this story takes twists you won't believe. Now, let me tell you how my brother's cruelty became his downfall. The insult at Thanksgiving wasn't new, just louder than usual. Derek had been the golden child our entire lives, and I'd been the disappointment who could never measure up no matter what I achieved. Growing up, Derek got praised for bringing home report cards with mostly B's, while I graduated top of my law school and nobody mentioned it at family dinners. He became a real estate agent with mediocre success, yet our parents talked about him like he'd built an empire. I was on partnership track at one of the most prestigious law firms in Connecticut, winning cases that made regional news. But at every family gathering, the only question I got was when I'd settle down like Derek. That Thanksgiving dinner felt like every other family event, just amplified. Derek spent 20 minutes boasting about his upcoming promotion, which I knew from LinkedIn was actually just a lateral move to a different brokerage. Christina clung to his arm the whole time, her voice dripping with fake sweetness as she mentioned they'd been apartment hunting together. She kept dropping hints about engagement, and I watched my mother's face light up like Christmas morning. Patricia immediately started talking about potential wedding venues, asking Christina about her dream ceremony while completely ignoring the fact that I was sitting right there. When I tried to share news about a case I'd just won, securing a 7-figure settlement for a client who'd been defrauded by their business partner, Derek cut me off mid-sentence. "Money isn't everything, sis," he said with that condescending tone he'd perfected over 3 decades. "You need someone to share life with, someone who actually wants to come home to you." Christina added her own poison, suggesting she could set me up with her cousin Brad because he supposedly didn't mind career women, as if my profession was some kind of defect that required special tolerance. The dinner continued its painful trajectory when Derek announced he was starting his own real estate firm and needed a $50,000 investment from our father. Howard agreed immediately, without a single question about business plans or market research. I sat there remembering how just last year, I'd asked for $20,000 to invest in a legal startup with 2 colleagues, a venture that would have given me equity and partnership potential, and my parents had refused flat out. They'd told me it was too risky, that I should focus on my stable job, that investing was gambling when you didn't have a family to support. But Derek asked for more than twice that amount and got an instant yes with a handshake and a proud smile. Throughout all of this, Christina's behavior struck me as increasingly strange. Her phone kept buzzing during dinner, vibrating against the mahogany table every few minutes. She excused herself 3 times to powder her nose, which seemed excessive even for someone high maintenance. I noticed her texting frantically in the hallway when I went to help clear plates after the main course, her thumbs flying across the screen with urgency that didn't match her relaxed demeanor at the table. When she returned, her smile seemed forced, stretched too tight across her face like plastic wrap. Derek remained completely oblivious, continuing to talk about their perfect relationship and how lucky he was to find someone who appreciated him for who he really was. After dinner, I helped my mother clear dishes in the kitchen, falling into the familiar role of useful daughter, even though nothing I did ever seemed quite good enough. I was loading the dishwasher when I saw Christina's phone on the counter, left behind during one of her bathroom trips. The screen lit up with another text from Jay. Can't wait to see you tomorrow when he's at work. My lawyer instincts kicked in immediately. That trained observation that had served me well in court. I didn't touch the phone, didn't confront anyone, just filed the information away in my mental catalog. Something wasn't right with my brother's perfect relationship, but I had no idea then how deep the deception ran or how it would intersect with everything else that was about to happen. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I was deep in preparation for the biggest professional moment of my life. The partnership decision was coming up at my firm, and I was competing with a colleague named Vincent for the single open partner slot. I'd spent 7 years at this firm, working 70-hour weeks, sacrificing weekends and holidays, building a reputation as someone who won difficult cases. Partnership wasn't just a title. It represented validation, security, and proof that all those sacrifices meant something. Vincent was good, but I'd brought in more billable hours and had a higher case victory rate. I felt confident, maybe for the first time in my life when it came to family perception. If I made partner, surely even my parents would have to acknowledge my success. That's when Derek called with an olive branch I should never have accepted. His voice on the phone was unusually warm, almost apologetic without actually apologizing for the Thanksgiving comment. He said he'd been thinking about our relationship as siblings, that family was important, and he wanted to make amends. Then he offered something that seemed too good to be true: a potential client who needed legal services. Derek said he'd met a construction company owner through his real estate work, someone who was looking for a sharp lawyer to review contracts and handle some regulatory issues. He wanted to introduce us over lunch, claimed he wanted to support my career the way family should. I was so desperate for connection with my brother, so hungry for approval and normalcy in our relationship, that I ignored every red flag and agreed. The lunch meeting happened at an upscale restaurant downtown. Derek arrived with a man he introduced as Raymond Caldwell, owner of Caldwell Construction. Raymond was in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit, carrying himself with the confidence of someone used to making deals. We talked for 90 minutes about his business needs, and I gave him preliminary advice about contract structures and compliance issues. I was thorough but professional, careful not to promise anything without proper retention agreements. Raymond seemed genuinely impressed, asked intelligent questions, and requested my business card at the end of the meal. Derek seemed pleased throughout, even hugged me goodbye in the parking lot. I drove back to my office feeling something I rarely experienced with my family: hope. Maybe Derek and I could have a real relationship. Maybe he actually wanted his sister to succeed. 3 days later, that hope shattered into pieces. My managing partner, Stuart, called me into his office with a face I'd never seen him make before, stern and disappointed and somehow sad all at once. Raymond Caldwell had filed a formal complaint against me with the State Bar Association. He claimed I'd given him illegal advice during our lunch, specifically that I'd encouraged him to avoid building regulations through creative interpretation, and suggested he could bribe city inspectors to overlook code violations. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I'd said nothing remotely close to that. My advice had been completely ethical, focused on legitimate compliance strategies and proper permitting processes. But Raymond had receipts, or so he claimed. The evidence Raymond provided included a recording of our conversation, except it wasn't really our conversation. Someone had edited it heavily, taking my words completely out of context and rearranging them to make me sound corrupt and unethical. When I said, "Some contractors find creative solutions within the regulatory framework," it was edited to sound like I was suggesting fraud. When I mentioned that building relationships with city officials can smooth the permitting process, referring to professional networking, it was cut to imply bribery. The recording was a masterpiece of manipulation, and Stuart told me the firm had no choice but to suspend me pending a full investigation. My partnership consideration was frozen immediately. I watched Vincent settle into what should have been my future, taking meetings with clients I'd cultivated, sitting in the office that represented everything I'd worked for. I called Derek immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. He didn't answer. I called again and again over 2 days, leaving voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to desperate. Finally, he sent a text. Don't drag me into your mess. I introduced you to a potential client as a favor. What you said to him is your responsibility. That's when I understood. The lunch had been a setup from the beginning. Derek had never wanted to help my career. He wanted to destroy it. Raymond Caldwell wasn't a real potential client. He was an actor in Derek's play, performing a role designed to damage me professionally at the exact moment when I was closest to achieving something my brother never could. I tried calling my mother for support, needing someone in my family to believe me, to see that Derek had done something terrible. Patricia answered on the fourth ring, her voice already defensive before I finished explaining. Maybe you were too aggressive in the meeting, she suggested. You can come across as harsh sometimes, sweetheart. Men don't always respond well to women who are too assertive in business. She actually blamed me for being set up. My father wouldn't even take my call. I sat in my apartment that night, suspended from work, watching my career implode, realizing that my own brother had orchestrated this elaborate sabotage, and my parents would never believe me over him. It never felt more alone in my life. 1 month crawled by like a year. The investigation eventually cleared me when an audio forensics expert proved the recording had been tampered with, but the damage was done. Partnership was delayed another year. My reputation had a stain that whispers in conference rooms couldn't quite erase, and Vincent was comfortable in the partner office that should have been mine. It'd been vindicated technically but destroyed practically. I spent my days going through motions at work, taking cases nobody else wanted, trying to rebuild credibility one small victory at a time. That's when Joanna walked into my life, literally sitting down across from me, uninvited at a coffee shop where I was drowning my sorrows in an overpriced latte. She was 28, with nervous energy radiating off her like heat, fidgeting with her phone and looking at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You're Derek's sister, right?" she said without introduction. "We need to talk." I almost told her to leave, assuming she was another plant in whatever game my brother was playing, but something in her voice stopped me. She wasn't performing. She was scared. Joanna told me everything in a rush, words tumbling out like she'd been holding them in too long. She was the J from the text messages on Christina's phone. They'd been having an affair for 8 months, meeting in hotels and at Joanna's apartment whenever Derek was showing properties. Christina was bisexual, Joanna explained, and using Derek for access to his family money. The plan was simple: marry Derek, get herself established with access to my parents' wealth, then continue the affair secretly while playing the dutiful wife. Joanna had fallen in love, genuinely and completely, but Christina wouldn't leave Derek. She kept promising it was just business, that Derek meant nothing to her, that she'd leave him eventually, but eventually never came. Joanna's conscience had finally caught up with her. She'd seen Derek's family in photos posted on social media after Thanksgiving, including me, and realized Christina was manipulating everyone. She'd been stalking my social media, found out where I worked, and tracked my routine to find me. She was crying as she talked, mascara running down her cheeks, asking me what she should do. My first instinct was to expose everything immediately, to call Derek right there and burn Christina's world down. But my lawyer brain took over, the analytical part of me that had been trained to think strategically. Derek wouldn't believe Joanna without proof. My parents would think I'd hired someone to lie out of jealousy. I needed concrete evidence, documentation that couldn't be explained away. Joanna and I formed an unlikely alliance that afternoon. She had keys to Christina's separate apartment, the one Derek didn't know about, where Christina kept her second phone and all the evidence of her double life. Joanna had access to text messages, emails, photos, everything we'd need to prove the affair beyond any doubt. We made a plan to gather evidence systematically, building a case like I would for any client. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt like someone was on my side, like I wasn't fighting this battle completely alone. The very next week, Derek announced his engagement at a family dinner, complete with a ring that probably cost more than my car. The wedding date was set for 6 months away, right in the middle of spring. My parents were ecstatic, immediately offering to pay for everything and suggesting a budget of $75,000. I remembered how they'd refused my $20,000 investment request and felt sick. Christina asked me to be a bridesmaid with a smile that was pure poison, knowing I couldn't refuse without looking bitter. I accepted through gritted teeth, already planning how this wedding would become the stage for truth. At the engagement party my parents threw the following weekend, Christina pulled me aside while Derek was accepting congratulations from relatives. "I know you're jealous," she said quietly, her voice sweet enough to rot teeth. "But try to be happy for your brother." Then she leaned closer, her breath hot on my ear, and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Derek told me about the little favor he did, setting you up with that client. Guess it didn't work out? Shame about your partnership." She knew. Christina had known about Derek's sabotage, might have even helped plan it. They weren't just using each other. They were collaborating against me. I stood there smiling at the party, champagne glass in hand, realizing I was fighting two enemies instead of one. 3 months before the wedding, Derek showed up at my parents' house for Sunday dinner with a new attitude toward me. He was suddenly kind, apologizing for any misunderstandings we'd had, saying he wanted a fresh start as siblings before he got married. I was suspicious immediately, but my parents were watching with hopeful faces, clearly having encouraged this reconciliation. Family dinners had been tense since the engagement, with me barely speaking and Derek pretending everything was fine. Now he wanted to clear the air, to move forward as a real family. After dinner, Derek asked if we could talk privately. We went out to the back porch, and he launched into what seemed like a genuine confession. His real estate firm was struggling more than Head admitted. The market was tough, competition was brutal, and Head made some mistakes with cash flow. He needed a co-signer for a business loan, $250,000 that would keep him afloat and allow him to expand into commercial properties. Banks had rejected his applications because of credit issues I didn't know about, but with my excellent credit and strong financial history, we could get approved together. He promised it was a guaranteed return, that commercial real estate was booming, that He'd pay everything back within 2 years. I wanted to say no. Every instinct I had screamed that this was another trap, but then my parents joined us on the porch, and the pressure became overwhelming. Patricia talked about how family helps family, how this was my chance to support Derek the way Head always supported me, conveniently forgetting that Head never actually supported me in anything. Howard reminded me of everything they'd sacrificed, raising 2 children, putting us through school, giving us opportunities. The guilt was suffocating. Christina appeared too, adding her own manipulation. "If you really support your brother's happiness, you'll help him build a future for our family." I was surrounded, drowning in expectations and obligations, and the desperate need to finally be seen as a good daughter and sister. I signed the co-signer papers the next week. Derek hugged me, told me I was saving his life, promised He'd never forget what I'd done for him. For exactly 2 months, I felt like maybe I'd been wrong about him. Maybe the lunch setup had been a genuine mistake, a misunderstanding that spiraled out of control. Maybe Derek really was trying to change. Then the calls started coming from the bank. Derek had defaulted on the loan immediately, every single payment. The business loan he'd co-signed? It had never gone to any business. Derek had a gambling problem he'd never known about, a poker addiction that had been eating his finances for years. He'd been spending nights at underground card games, losing thousands of dollars at a time, digging himself into debt with people who didn't accept excuses. The loan money went straight to pay off gambling debts, and Derek never intended to pay it back. The bank came after me as co-signer, freezing my savings accounts and garnishing my wages. I watched my financial stability evaporate in days. When I confronted Derek, he had his story ready. He claimed He'd told me the business was struggling, that I knew the risks when I signed. My parents believed him completely. Howard actually told me I should have read the fine print more carefully, that as a lawyer I had no excuse for not understanding what I was signing. Patricia suggested I was being dramatic, that business loans always had ups and downs. They blamed me for the consequences of Derek's fraud. I'd been trapped perfectly, legally bound to debt I couldn't escape, financially crippled just like Derek and Christina had planned. Joanna found the emails 2 weeks later, accessing Christina's account while she was in the shower. Derek had written to Christina months before the loan. "She's so desperate for approval. She'll sign anything if mom and dad push hard enough." Christina had replied, "Perfect. Once we're married and her money problems keep her too busy to interfere, we can do whatever we want." They'd orchestrated the entire thing, using my family's dysfunction against me, knowing exactly which buttons to push. I was playing checkers while they were playing chess, and I was losing badly. I had to move out of my apartment, the one-bedroom place I'd been so proud to afford on my own. The rent was suddenly impossible with garnished wages and frozen savings. I found a tiny studio in a neighborhood I'd never have chosen, with thin walls and suspicious stains on the carpet. My car got repossessed 3 weeks later. I started taking public transportation to work, leaving my apartment at 6 in the morning to make it to the office by 9. My colleagues noticed. Vincent smirked every time he passed my cubicle, enjoying my downfall. I was living on ramen noodles and shame, watching everything I'd built crumble because I'd trusted my brother one more time. The panic attack hit me on a Tuesday night. I was sitting on the air mattress that was my only furniture, eating ramen straight from the pot because I didn't have dishes yet. When my chest started tightening, I couldn't breathe. The walls closed in. My vision went dark at the edges. I ended up on the bathroom floor, hyperventilating, sobbing, completely alone. I thought about giving up everything, leaving Connecticut, abandoning my law career, moving somewhere nobody knew my name. I could start over as someone else, someone without a family that hated her, without debt that would follow her for decades. But then Joanna showed up with groceries the next day, having somehow known I needed help, and she sat with me through another panic attack and reminded me that Derek couldn't win if I kept fighting. 2 months before the wedding, I was barely surviving financially, but still expected to participate in wedding activities like nothing had happened. Christina had selected bridesmaid dresses that cost $500 each, knowing I couldn't possibly afford it. When I hesitated, she offered to pay for mine in front of the other bridesmaids, making it clear she was doing me a charity. She held that generosity over my head for weeks, mentioning it constantly, reminding me how grateful I should be. The dress-fitting appointment was scheduled at an exclusive bridal boutique downtown. I showed up on time, dreading the whole experience but trapped by family obligation. The other bridesmaids were all Christina's friends, women who looked at me like I was a curiosity, Derek's weird sister who couldn't keep her life together. Christina had ordered my dress 2 sizes too small deliberately. When I tried it on, it wouldn't zip, wouldn't even come close. She acted shocked, claiming there must have been a mistake with the measurements. I had to stand on the platform in the middle of the store, while the seamstress struggled and failed to make the dress fit. The other bridesmaids whispered and giggled. Christina announced loudly that maybe I should lay off stress eating, that wedding photos were forever and we all needed to look our best. The humiliation burned through me. Several other customers in the boutique stared. The seamstress looked embarrassed for me. I wanted to die right there. Meanwhile, my parents had given Derek another $75,000 for what they thought was a business restart. In reality, the money was going toward the wedding and an elaborate honeymoon in Bora Bora. I asked my parents for a loan to help cover my debt payments, just $10,000 to get me through the worst of it. Howard refused flat out, telling me I needed to learn financial responsibility and live with the consequences of my choices. The hypocrisy was so thick I could choke on it. Derek could gamble away hundreds of thousands and get unlimited support, but I was drowning because of his fraud and got lectures about responsibility. The week before the wedding, Quinn approached me at work. She was my paralegal, someone I'd worked with for 3 years but never gotten close to personally. She looked nervous, checking over her shoulder before speaking quietly. Shed overheard Vincent talking to Stuart in the conference room, door slightly ajar, voices carrying. Vincent had been feeding Stuart false information about me for months. He claimed I was trying to steal clients, behaving unethically with case files, violating confidentiality agreements. Stuart was planning to fire me the week after Derek's wedding, timing it to avoid family drama. Quinn had been documenting everything, making copies of Vincent's emails and recording his conversations. She handed me a USB drive with all the evidence and told me she was on my side. I did more digging based on Quinn's information and discovered something that made my stomach turn. Vincent and Derek knew each other. They'd been fraternity brothers in college, staying in casual touch over the years. Derek had asked Vincent to keep an eye on me at the firm 3 years ago when I first started gaining recognition for my casework. Vincent saw an opportunity and took it. If he could eliminate me as competition, he'd get the partnership. Derek got the satisfaction of destroying my career. It was a 3-year conspiracy. Coordinated attacks from my own brother using someone I saw at work every single day. Every time Vincent had seemed supportive, every piece of advice he'd given me, every friendly conversation had been reconnaissance. The termination notice arrived in my personal email that Friday. It was effective the Monday after Derek's wedding, exactly as Quinn had warned. I'd lose my health insurance, my severance package, everything. I sat in my car in the parking garage after work, the same kind of garage where I'd had my first panic attack months ago, and I screamed until my throat was raw. I was exhausted from fighting, from being attacked from every direction, from trying to survive against people who were supposed to love me. I started the car, seriously considering driving away from Connecticut and never looking back. But then I thought about Joanna and Quinn, 2 women who'd taken risks to help me when they didn't have to. I thought about everyone else Derek might hurt if I gave up. Christina would marry him, drain my parents' money, destroy my brother, even though he'd destroyed me first. Vincent would keep climbing at the firm, stepping on whoever got in his way. I couldn't stop everything, but I could at least expose the truth. So I drove to Quinn's apartment instead of away from Connecticut. Joanna met us there. We spent the entire weekend putting together a plan. Christina called me Sunday night with her final piece of cruelty. She needed me to give a toast at the wedding reception, she said, about how wonderful Derek was as a brother, about how happy she was to be joining our family. She wanted me to stand in front of 300 people and publicly praise the man who'd spent years systematically destroying my life. It was the ultimate humiliation, the final test of how far she could push me. I told her I'd be honored to give a toast. I could hear the smile in her voice when she thanked me. She thought she'd won completely. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, sunny and 75 degrees, exactly what you'd want for an outdoor ceremony at an expensive country club. 300 guests filled white chairs arranged in neat rows on manicured lawn. My parents were crying before the ceremony even started, so proud of their son, so happy he'd found the perfect woman. I arrived in the awful bridesmaid dress that Christina had finally had altered to fit me, a shade of peach that looked terrible on everyone. I pasted a smile on my face and took my position. Behind the scenes, everything was ready. Joanna was positioned outside the venue with backup evidence in her car, prepared to come in on cue. Quinn was in the crowd with her laptop, having accessed the venue's AV system the day before during setup when nobody was paying attention to the quiet paralegal helping arrange seating charts. I had the microphone for my toast, our timing synchronized down to the minute. Everything we'd planned over months of gathering evidence was about to happen. The ceremony proceeded exactly as scripted. Derek stood at the altar wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be, confidence radiating from him. He thought he'd won everything, destroyed his sister and secured his trophy wife and his parents' money all at once. Christina walked down the aisle in a dress that cost $30,000, fake tears of joy streaming down her professionally made-up face. My mother sobbed into a handkerchief. My father looked proud enough to burst. I stood at the altar with the other bridesmaids, watching this performance, knowing how it was about to end. The officiant went through the vows, and Derek and Christina said I do with practiced sincerity. They kissed, while everyone applauded. The wedding party recessed down the aisle. We moved into the reception hall for dinner, a ballroom decorated with thousands of dollars worth of flowers. The meal was elaborate, course after course of expensive food that tasted like dust in my mouth. Then the speeches began. The best man gave a generic speech about friendship and loyalty that would have been funny if he knew who Derek really was. The maid of honor, one of Christina's friends, gushed about the couple's perfect love story and how she'd never seen 2 people more meant for each other. Then it was my turn. I walked to the microphone with my champagne glass, wearing the smile I'd perfected over months of family dinners. Derek looked smug, probably expecting me to embarrass myself. Christina's expression was victorious, thinking she'd broken me completely. I began with traditional words. My brother Derek has always been special to our family. The crowd settled in for what they assumed would be a sweet sibling speech. I paused, looking around the room at all these people who had no idea what they were really celebrating. Then I shifted tone. Special in his ability to manipulate everyone around him, to lie so convincingly that even the people who should know better believe every word. The room went silent. Derek's face changed from smug to confused to angry in 3 seconds. Before anyone could react, Quinn activated the projector WED, secretly connected to the venue's system. The first slide appeared on the large screens meant for displaying wedding photos. Text messages between Christina and Joanna filled the screens. Explicit conversations about their affair. Declarations of love. Plans to deceive Derek. There were messages from the morning of the wedding. Christina telling Joanna she'd be free tomorrow to spend the day together while Derek was at work. The crowd gasped collectively. Christina's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. On cue, Joanna walked through the main doors of the reception hall. She'd dressed carefully for this moment, professional but unmistakable. She walked to the front of the room and stood next to me at the microphone. "My name is Joanna," she said, her voice shaking slightly but clear. "I'm the woman Christina has been sleeping with for 8 months, including last night while Derek thought she was having a bachelorette party with her bridesmaids." She held up her phone, showing photo after photo with timestamps. Christina and Joanna kissing, holding hands, lying in bed together. Some photos were from the previous night, time-stamped just hours before the ceremony. Derek lunged toward Christina, grabbing her shoulders. "Is this true?" he shouted. Christina tried to deny it, stammering about lies and setup and jealousy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Guests were already pulling out their phones, taking videos. Christina finally broke down, the mask shattering completely. "Yes, it's true," she screamed. "You want to know why? Because you're boring. Your family has money, but you're a complete failure. I was never going to actually be your wife, just your bank account." The viciousness in her voice shocked even me. This wasn't a desperate woman caught in a lie. This was someone who'd never cared at all, revealing her contempt. I took the microphone back. The next slides appeared on the screens, bank statements and loan documents. While we're sharing truths, I said, "Let's talk about Derek's gambling addiction and how he defrauded me out of $250,000. The statements showed deposits into Derek's account followed immediately by withdrawals at casinos. There were records of the loan I'd co-signed and Derek's immediate default. His business had never existed. Every dollar had gone to poker games and slot machines. My parents saw their $75,000 investment disappear into gambling losses, documented transaction by transaction. The emails came next. Quinn had organized them chronologically, showing the full conspiracy. Derek's messages to Vincent about sabotaging my career, going back 3 years. Vincent's reports about my cases and clients, feeding Derek information. The plan to set me up with the fake client Raymond Caldwell. Derek's message to Christina. "She's so desperate for approval, she'll sign anything if Mom and Dad push hard enough." Christina's reply. "Once we're married and her money problems keep her too busy to interfere with us, we can do whatever we want." Their plan to use my family's dysfunction to destroy me, laid out in their own words. I detailed every attack. The fake lunch meeting that nearly ended my career. The financial trap with the co-signed loan that left me homeless and broke. The ongoing sabotage through Vincent at my firm. The wedding humiliations, from the too small dress to demanding I give a speech praising Derek. 3 years of coordinated cruelty from my own brother and his accomplice, all documented, all undeniable. My managing partner Stuart was in the crowd, invited as a courtesy since Derek had claimed we had a great sibling relationship. I watched Stuart's face as he saw the emails between Derek and Vincent, realizing his partner had been lying to him for years. Vincent was also there, sitting near the back, probably enjoying what he thought would be my forced humiliation. His face went white as his conspiracy appeared on screen. He tried to leave but found Quinn blocking his path, arms crossed. Patricia fainted, my mother's body going limp in her chair. Howard caught her, looking between the screens and Derek with an expression he'd never seen on my father's face before. Total confusion, like his worldview had shattered in minutes. Guests were in chaos. Some were crying, some were angry. Many were filming everything on their phones, and I knew this would be online within hours. Derek tried to grab the microphone from me, shouting that I was a vindictive bitch who couldn't stand seeing him happy. Security stepped between us, hotel employees who'd been briefed by Quinn about potential disruption. I spoke calmly into the microphone, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You were never happy, Derek. You were just cruel. There's a difference. Christina ran from the room, her $30,000 dress trailing behind her. Joanna followed, making sure Christina left the property. Derek collapsed into a chair, head in his hands, his tuxedo suddenly looking like a costume on a man playing dress-up. The wedding coordinator stood frozen, unsure how to handle a reception where the marriage had imploded before dinner was served. Guests began filtering out awkwardly, some offering my parents condolences like there'd been a death. I stood at the microphone looking at my parents across the ruined reception hall. I spent my whole life trying to earn your love, I said, loud enough for everyone remaining to hear. Derek spent his whole life taking advantage of it. I hope you finally see the difference. Then I walked out with my head high, Quinn following with all our equipment. We left Derek sitting in the ruins of his wedding, left my parents staring at evidence they could no longer ignore, left 300 guests with a story they'd tell for years. The $75,000 wedding had lasted less than 3 hours. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely empty. I'd imagined this moment for months, the exposure and justice and Derek's downfall, but instead of triumph, I just felt exhausted. My phone showed 87 missed calls from family members, voicemails piling up faster than I could delete them. I didn't listen to any of them. Someone's video of the wedding revelation was already trending on local social media, shared thousands of times. Derek's real estate license was under review by the state board. Christina had apparently left Connecticut entirely, moving back to her home state before anyone could ask more questions. Joanna texted me a simple thank you and said she finally felt free. My parents showed up at my studio apartment at 10 in the morning. I opened the door expecting apologies, ready to begin the hard work of repairing our relationship now that they'd seen the truth. Instead, they were furious. Howard's face was red, veins visible in his neck. Patricia's eyes were cold in a way he'd never seen directed at me before. How could you destroy your brother's wedding? My father demanded before even stepping inside. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't acknowledge that everything I'd revealed was true. They were angry that I'd made the family look bad in front of 300 people. My mother started crying, but these weren't tears of sympathy for what I'd endured. She was crying about embarrassment, about what the relatives would think, about how they'd ever show their faces at the country club again. You've made a spectacle of this entire family, Patricia said. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for us? We can never go back there. Everyone we know saw that disaster. I stood in my tiny apartment, wearing pajamas I'd owned for 5 years because I couldn't afford new ones, and listened to my parents prioritize their social standing over their daughter's suffering. They demanded I publicly apologize and take back everything I'd said. They wanted me to claim I'd misunderstood Derek's intentions, that the evidence was taken out of context, that I'd had some kind of breakdown from work stress. They wanted me to repair their image by destroying my credibility. When I refused, when I stood my ground and said every word I'd spoken was true and proven, my father delivered the final blow. Then you're no longer our daughter. Don't contact us again until you're ready to make this right. They left me standing in my doorway. I watched them walk to their expensive car and drive away from the worst neighborhood I'd ever lived in, abandoning me completely. I'd thought the wedding would be the end of the pain, that exposing Derek would free me from the family dysfunction. Instead, I'd lost what little family connection I'd ever had. My parents chose their son's lies over their daughter's truth, chose their reputation over my survival. That was the fifth attack, and it hurt worse than all the others combined because it was so final. Derek filed a lawsuit against me 3 days later. His lawyers claimed defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, seeking $500,000 in damages. He was using money from our parents to pay for attorneys from a firm more expensive than mine had ever been. I couldn't afford legal defense. The free consultation I managed to get from a lawyer friend confirmed I'd probably win eventually since everything I'd said was true and provable, but the process would take years and cost tens of thousands I didn't have. The smear campaign started immediately. Derek told everyone who'd listen that I was mentally unstable, that I'd fabricated evidence out of jealousy, that I'd always been the troubled child who needed attention. Some extended family believed him because believing me meant accepting that they'd been fooled by Derek for decades. My aunts called to express disappointment in my behavior. My uncles unfriended me on social media. Cousins I'd grown up with stopped responding to messages. I was labeled the family villain, the crazy sister who'd destroyed a wedding out of spite. Vincent accelerated my termination at work. I was fired officially. No severance, no recommendation letters. Had already been spreading rumors that I was a litigation risk after the wedding incident, warning other lawyers in our professional community to avoid hiring me. I couldn't get interviews at other firms. My career in corporate law seemed finished at 32 years old. Everything I'd worked for since law school was gone. I sat in my empty studio apartment exactly 2 weeks after the wedding, unable to pay the following month's rent, with no job and no family, and a lawsuit threatening bankruptcy. I seriously considered abandoning law entirely, maybe moving to a different state and working retail, or something completely unrelated to my education. I'd sacrificed everything for a career that had been stolen from me and a family that had never wanted me. What was the point of continuing to fight? Quinn showed up that evening with a cardboard box. Shed quit the firm in solidarity with me, refusing to work for Vincent after everything Shed witnessed. But before leaving, Shed copied more files, documentation of Vincent's own crimes. Had been embezzling from client accounts for 2 years, small amounts he thought no one would notice. Quinn had noticed. Shed documented every transaction, every fake expense report, every dollar Vincent had stolen. She handed me the evidence and said, "You have leverage now. Use it." That's when I started to see a path forward. Vincent's crimes were serious enough to get him disbarred and potentially imprisoned. I could use this information, not for revenge, but for justice. I could negotiate my termination, get the recommendation letters and severance I deserved, clear my name professionally. I wouldn't be the victim anymore. I'd be the one holding the cards. Joanna texted me around the same time with her own update. She'd been contacted by Christina's family, people looking for information about their daughter's whereabouts. Through those conversations, Joanna discovered Christina had a history. 3 previous broken engagements, always with wealthy men, always profiting somehow before disappearing. Derek wasn't her first target and wouldn't have been her last. Joanna was putting together documentation for fraud charges that could span multiple states. Christina's pattern was about to catch up with her. I realized that night that I had more power than I'd thought. I'd been so focused on being attacked that I hadn't fully recognized the weapons I'd gathered along the way. Evidence against Vincent, evidence against Christina, documentation of Derek's fraud. I wasn't helpless anymore. I was armed. It was time to stop just defending and start actively fighting back, not for revenge but for the justice I deserved. 2 weeks after the wedding implosion, I filed a formal complaint against Vincent with the State Bar Association. The evidence Quinn provided was irrefutable. Bank records showed exactly where money had gone missing from client trust accounts. Fake expense reports documented Vincent's systematic theft over 2 years. I represented myself in the bar complaint, unable to afford an attorney but more than capable of presenting documentation. The bar suspended Vincent pending investigation within 48 hours. I requested a meeting with Stewart, my former managing partner, and brought Quinn as my witness. We presented the full scope of Vincent's crimes and the 3-year conspiracy with Derek. Stewart's firm was facing potential liability for employing someone hot embezzled from clients. Their malpractice insurance would skyrocket. Their reputation was on the line. Stewart looked like he'd aged a decade during our 2-hour meeting, realizing his partner had been playing him the entire time. I negotiated from a position of strength for the first time in years. I demanded reinstatement with back pay for the time it'd been suspended after the Raymond Caldwell setup. I demanded the partnership consideration process be reopened, acknowledging that it'd been sabotaged during my original evaluation. I demanded Vincent's immediate termination and the firm's cooperation in his prosecution. I demanded a formal written apology in my personnel file, acknowledging the injustice. And I demanded recommendation letters explaining that the previous termination had been based on false information. Stewart agreed to everything. The firm needed this, buried quietly. But when Stewart offered me the partnership position, I declined. I was done with corporate law, done with firms where people like Vincent could thrive. I wanted to start my own practice, something focused on helping people who'd been victimized by fraud, especially family fraud. I wanted to use everything I'd learned from being destroyed by my brother to protect others from the same fate. I took the settlement money and the severance package and the recommendation letters, and I walked away from corporate law forever. The bank investigation into Derek's loan fraud concluded in my favor. Forensic accountants traced exactly where the money had gone, documenting his gambling addiction and intentional fraud. I was released from the co-signer debt obligation, no longer responsible for his $250,000. The bank seized Derek's assets, what few he had left. My parents were given a choice: pay back the loan Derek had taken, or face foreclosure on their house. They chose to pay, liquidating retirement accounts and taking out a second mortgage. They still blamed me for forcing this situation, rather than blaming Derek for creating it. Derek's real estate license was revoked after the state board reviewed his conduct. He was charged with loan fraud and faced up to 5 years in prison. His gambling addiction was exposed publicly during court proceedings. My parents finally had to acknowledge their son's problems, though they did so quietly, telling relatives Derek was going through a difficult time rather than admitting he'd been a con artist. They couldn't quite let go of the image they'd built of their golden child. Christina's justice came through Joanna's persistence. The evidence Joanna had gathered led to fraud charges in multiple states. Other victims came forward. Men who'd been engaged to Christina briefly before she disappeared with money or property. There was a pattern going back a decade: engagement scams where shed-charm wealthy men extract what she could, then vanish. Federal prosecutors got involved. Christina was arrested and faced 15 years across multiple fraud counts. Joanna finally got closure, understanding that she'd been manipulated just like everyone else. She moved on with her life, started dating someone new, someone honest. I opened my solo practice from my tiny studio apartment, converting half the space into a makeshift office. I couldn't afford proper office space yet, but I could afford a decent laptop and a phone line. I specialized in family fraud and financial exploitation, taking cases from people who'd been scammed by relatives. My first client was a woman whose brother had stolen her inheritance through forged documents. I won the case easily, drawing on my own experience with family betrayal. Word spread through legal aid networks and victim advocacy groups. More clients came. Quinn joined me as my paralegal, taking a pay cut from what she'd made at the corporate firm but saying the work felt meaningful for the first time in her career. We hired an assistant a few months later, a woman named Ruby who'd survived financial abuse from her sister. Our little practice became a place where people who'd been betrayed by family could find support and justice. It was healing for everyone involved, turning our own victimization into purpose. My uncle Gerald reached out 6 months after the wedding. He was my father's younger brother, someone I hadn't seen much growing up. He'd watched everything unfold and wanted me to know he believed me. Gerald revealed he'd been cut off from the family years ago for questioning Derek's behavior and challenging our parents' favoritism. He'd tried to warn Howard and Patricia that they were creating a monster, and they'd stopped inviting him to family events. Gerald and I started having dinner together weekly, building a genuine relationship. Finally, I had a family member who actually saw me. My practice grew steadily. 6 months after opening, I was featured in the local legal journal in a profile about lawyers who turned personal victimization into advocacy. Other attorneys started referring complex family fraud cases to me, trusting my expertise and unique insight. I hired 2 more attorneys to help handle the caseload. We moved into a real office space, nothing fancy but legitimate and professional. I was making more money than I ever had at the corporate firm, and the work actually mattered. Patricia called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Derek had been sentenced to 4 years in prison. She and Howard had attended the trial, sitting in the back row, watching evidence presented that they could no longer deny or explain away. Derek had shown no remorse during sentencing. Had blamed everyone else, me for exposing him, Christina for betraying him, our parents for not giving him enough support, society for making gambling accessible. The judge had been unimpressed. My mother's voice shook as she said, "I'm sorry we didn't believe you." I didn't forgive her immediately. I set boundaries I should have established years ago. "If you want a relationship with me, we need family therapy," I told her. "You need to acknowledge the favoritism that enabled Derek's behavior and damaged us both. You need to make real amends, not just apologize because he finally got caught." I made it clear forgiveness would be conditional and earned, not automatic. I prioritized my own healing over their comfort. Patricia agreed to try. Howard was more reluctant but eventually joined the therapy sessions. Our relationship remained distant but slowly improved from non-existent to civil. My personal life shifted too. I started dating again, exploring parts of myself I'd suppressed. I didn't forgive her immediately. I set boundaries I should have established years ago. "If you want a relationship with me, we need family therapy," I told her. "You need to acknowledge the favoritism that enabled Derek's behavior and damaged us both. You need to make real amends, not just apologize because he finally got caught." I made it clear forgiveness would be conditional and earned, not automatic. I prioritized my own healing over their comfort. Patricia agreed to try. Howard was more reluctant but eventually joined the therapy sessions. Our relationship remained distant but slowly improved from non-existent to civil. My personal life shifted too. I started dating again, exploring parts of myself I'd suppressed. "Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Mom and Dad pushed me to be successful, but I knew I couldn't compete with you, so I made sure you couldn't succeed either." I listened, without absolving him. The family dynamics that created this situation were complex. Our parents had pitted us against each other, favoring him but expecting him to match my natural talents. Derek had chosen cruelty as his response, but the system had enabled it. I told him, "I hope you find peace, but I don't need to give it to you. Your peace isn't my responsibility." I walked out of that prison knowing I'd never see him again, and I was okay with that. Closure didn't require reconciliation. 1 year after the wedding that never was, my practice celebrated its first anniversary. We had 10 employees now, working from a proper office in a nice building downtown. WED handled over 100 cases, recovering 85% of funds stolen from our clients. I'd built something meaningful from the wreckage of my family relationships, turning my worst experiences into a career helping others survive similar betrayals. I was in therapy weekly, processing trauma that went back decades. My therapist helped me understand I wasn't responsible for my family's choices, that my worth had never been tied to their approval even though I'd spent 32 years believing it was. Healing wasn't linear. Some days I still woke up angry about everything Derek had done. Some days I grieved the family I'd never had, the parents who'd chosen favoritism over fairness. We had 10 employees now, working from a proper office in a nice building downtown. WED handled over 100 cases, recovering 85% of funds stolen from our clients. I'd built something meaningful from the wreckage of my family relationships, turning my worst experiences into a career helping others survive similar betrayals. I was in therapy weekly, processing trauma that went back decades. My therapist helped me understand I wasn't responsible for my family's choices, that my worth had never been tied to their approval, even though I'd spent 32 years believing it was. Healing wasn't linear. Some days I still woke up angry about everything Derek had done. Some days I grieved the family I'd never had, the parents who'd chosen favoritism over fairness. Quinn had enrolled in law school, attending night classes while continuing to work as my paralegal. I was mentoring her, watching her develop into someone who would continue this work of helping fraud victims and advocating for vulnerable people. The practice would outlast me, growing beyond my personal story into something that served the community for years to come. Ruby, our office assistant, had opened up about her past. Her sister had stolen her identity and destroyed her credit, leaving Ruby financially devastated for years. I'd helped her sue and get a judgment. Ruby's sister was serving time for identity theft. The cycle of family justice continued, each case we handled representing someone's chance to rebuild. Derek was released after 3 years on early parole. He moved to a different state, starting over somewhere nobody knew his history. He sent me a letter without requesting a response, thanking me for forcing him to face himself. He was attending Gamblers Anonymous and working construction, living simply and staying away from cards. I wished him well from a distance. His redemption wasn't my concern, but I hoped he found genuine change. Christina was serving a 12-year sentence across multiple fraud counts in 6 states. Joanna had moved on completely, dating someone who treated her with honesty and respect. Sometimes Joanna spoke at my workshops about recognizing manipulation in relationships. Her story helped others identify red flags before getting trapped the way she had. I was nominated for the State Bar's Public Service Award and won it. My acceptance speech addressed a room full of lawyers and judges. My brother told me I was a lesbian who couldn't get a man. I said, hearing murmurs ripple through the crowd. He was half right. I am bisexual. I paused, watching faces. But he was wrong that it mattered. My worth isn't determined by my relationship status or my family's approval. It's defined by the work I do and the life I build on my own terms. I started monthly workshops open to the public called Recognizing Family Fraud and Financial Abuse. Hundreds of people attended over the year, sharing stories and finding community. Healing happened collectively when people realized they weren't alone in being betrayed by family. The workshops were free because I remembered what it felt like to have nothing, and I wanted resources available regardless of someone's financial situation. Simone and I moved in together after dating for a year. Our apartment was small but filled with warmth and laughter and safety, everything my childhood home had never been. She proposed on our 1-year anniversary with a simple question and no games, just pure love and honest commitment. I said yes without hesitation, ready to build a family that was chosen rather than assigned by blood. Our wedding was small, just 20 people who genuinely cared about us. Quinn stood as my maid of honor. Uncle Gerald walked me down the aisle, the only family member from my childhood who'd ever really seen me. My parents attended and sat quietly in the back, still working through their guilt. There was no drama, no hidden agendas, just joy. Joanna and Ruby came, part of the chosen family built from people who understood what it meant to survive betrayal. I thought back to that Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago sometimes, Derek's cruel words that had started everything. The humiliation and pain and betrayal had been overwhelming at the time, but I didn't regret exposing him. That wedding disaster had freed me from spending the rest of my life seeking approval from people who would never give it. Instead, I'd started building a life with people who actually valued me. The lesson I shared with every client and every workshop participant was simple. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who see you, support you, and believe you when everything falls apart. My brother had tried to destroy me with systematic cruelty that lasted years. Instead, Head accidentally freed me. I stopped seeking approval from parents who would never provide it, and started building a life with people who recognized my worth without needing to be convinced. My practice continued to grow, handling increasingly complex cases. We took on a landmark lawsuit involving adult children suing parents for financial exploitation. The case set legal precedent in Connecticut, establishing stronger protections for vulnerable adults being abused by family members. Other attorneys across the state started citing our work. I was changing the systems that had enabled my own abuse, creating legal frameworks that would protect future victims. I kept a letter in my desk drawer, something I'd written to my younger self during a particularly difficult therapy session. I read it sometimes when cases got hard, and I needed to remember why this work mattered. You will survive this. You will be more than they said you were. The pain you feel will fuel purpose. You will help others find their voice. You will be loved, genuinely and wholly, and you will love yourself. Every word had come true. Late one evening, I was alone in my office preparing for a new client meeting the next morning. A woman whose siblings had stolen her inheritance was coming in, her situation eerily similar to cases I'd handled before. I reviewed the file and made notes, planning our legal strategy. Simone texted asking when I'd be home for dinner. I smiled, packing up my briefcase and looking around the office. The walls were covered with photos of clients and recovered funds and justice served, evidence of victories that mattered. I locked the office door and walked to my car in the parking garage. The same type of garage where I'd once screamed in despair, thinking my life was over. But I was different now. Derek had taken his cruelty to prison, where he'd served time for his crimes. I'd taken my pain and built an empire of healing. His legacy was destruction. Mine was restoration. As I drove home to Simone in our peaceful apartment, I thought about forgiveness. I'd forgiven Derek, not for his benefit but for mine. Carrying anger had been exhausting. Letting it go was freedom. I didn't have a relationship with Derek and didn't need one. But I'd released the hold he'd had on my heart for so long. Sometimes people confused forgiveness with reconciliation, thinking they were the same thing. I knew better. Forgiveness was releasing the weight of what had been done to me. Freedom was living well despite those who'd tried to break me. And I was finally, beautifully, completely free. The story doesn't end with perfect resolution because real life rarely does. My parents are still working on our relationship, and progress is slow and uncertain. Derek is rebuilding his life separately, and we may never reconnect. But my practice continues growing, helping more victims find justice and recover what was stolen from them. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine, built on my own terms, and filled with people who deserve my love and time. Derek's Thanksgiving comment about me being a lesbian who couldn't get a man seems insignificant now, almost laughable in its smallness. I'm bisexual, successful, loved, and whole. I'm everything he said I couldn't be, not because I proved him wrong but because I stopped letting his words define my reality. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying him at his wedding. It was building a life so full and meaningful that his opinion became irrelevant. That's the freedom I wish for everyone who's been told they're not enough by the people who should have loved them most. So I want to ask you, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? Drop your story in the comments below because your experience might help someone else who's struggling right now. If this story resonated with you or reminded you that you're not alone in family dysfunction, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about survival and justice. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they can rebuild after betrayal. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that your worth isn't determined by the people who failed to see it. You deserve relationships built on honesty and respect, and sometimes that means creating chosen family when blood relatives fall short. Stay strong, protect your peace, and remember that the best revenge is living well. Take care of yourselves.